All right, let's jump right in. I am going to share with you one of the first principles of New Thought. So, I am learning about the 5 basic principles of New Thought Christianity. And the first one is the omnipresence of God. Before I go any further, I'm C. Robin McCoy. I am a ministerial student in the Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary and moving my way from deconstructing Christianity to adopting a new form of Christianity that I had not been aware of before, but one that I have come to embrace. And so I wanted to share with you, like I said I would, some of the things that I'm learning and some things that I'm chewing on right now. And I'm chewing on this first basic principle upon which New Thought Christianity is built on. And I'm going to read it to you. It is the omnipresence of God. Everything that exists or ever will exist is pressed out of the body of God, God's substance, in different forms of manifestation. Since the nature of God is absolute good, and everything is God's substance, there can be no evil in reality. And the supporting scripture is Psalm 139, 7 through 8. So yes, that is just the first principle. And it's a lot to chew on, right? I'm not even going to get into there can be no evil in reality right now. We'll do that maybe in the next video. But I wanted to first share some of my thoughts about the profoundness I kind of got as I really sat down and really noodled on the omnipresence of God. Now, I will admit that this isn't the first time I've ever heard this, right? This is the first time that I've ever had to really sit down and study this. I have been in many different spiritual classes with different church organizations, like the church I happen to belong to is Understanding Principles for Better Living Church in Los Angeles, even though I'm out here in Seattle. And, there's the Johnny Coleman Institute that I've gone to some classes, so I've heard these before. But I want to go over that first sentence about the omnipresence of God. And the thing that I want to talk about is what does omnipresent even mean? And because I always thought of omnipresent like God is everywhere. They say, well, God is everywhere. God, there's no spot where God is not. But when I looked up the word omnipresent, it says that omnipresent is present everywhere at the same time, which to me is like a level up from just there's no spot where God is not. It's like not just every space, but every space in time, right? As I was playing back this video, I wanted to add something. That before, when I heard that there's no spot where God is not, I always pictured God being everywhere, but as God being everywhere around me, like filling up the spaces around me. But not like what this is saying, that everything that exists is pressed out of the body of God. So it's not God is everywhere around me, like God is some external entity looking at what I'm doing and is an observer. But everything is God. God is everything. So that's a different way to look at things than I've looked at them in the past. Whereas God is, and God is both, right? So God is not only being pressed out through me, but God is in every person that I meet, in everything that I encounter, in every breath that I breathe, in the air that I am breathing right now. God is in it all. So, and I think before I always thought of God as just being this entity outside of me, but not personal. This to me feels a lot more personal. And so that first sentence says, everything that exists or will ever exist is pressed out of the body of God, God's substance, in different forms of manifestation. And so what that to me is saying that God is in everything, because for God to be present everywhere at the same time, everything is made up of God. Because it says everything that exists or ever will exist is pressed out of the body of God in different forms of manifestation. I translate that to mean that everything that is created out of God. God exists in every single thing. And therefore, there is not one thing that is not of God. And it just really makes me think about people who always talk about how they feel this oneness with nature, which I have to admit I've never really never really connected with that. But as I ponder this idea of an omnipresent God, where everything that exists or ever will exist is pressed out of the body of God's substance in different forms of manifestation, now I can understand why people can say they can go out into a forest and feel like they are 100% connected with the divine. But it also makes me think that you shouldn't have to go out into the forest to feel that, because if everything that exists or ever will exist, then I should feel that when I'm on a crowded street in Brooklyn, because everything and every person that exists there is pressed out of the body of God. In Psalm 139, 7 through 8, it reads, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there." And Sheol is another way of saying hell. So it's that there's nowhere that you can go and not be in the presence of the divine. And that is a wonderful thought. There is nowhere you can go, because everything that exists or ever will exist is pressed out of the body of God, God's substance, in different forms of manifestation. All of it is God. It's that different forms of manifestation piece that gets us tripped up, because that's where the personality comes in. That's where that free will to do what it is you will with the God substance that you are. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I really am pondering over this, and that's what I said I would be doing here. Is I don't have the answers, right? But I just wanted to share just how this first sentence, everything that exists or ever will exist, is pressed out of the body of God, God's substance, in different forms of manifestation. That we don't all need to be alike or think alike or look alike or do the same things alike, because they're different forms of manifestation, and that is part of the design. But at the core of all of us, we're all pressed out of the body of God's substance. We're all made up of God because God is present everywhere at the same time. And when you think about everything that ever exists, it makes me think of not just like animate things like people and dogs and, you know, cats or whatever, but in the breath, right? That there's God in my breath. There's God in the water that I drink. There's God in the food that I eat. There's God everywhere present at the same time. And that comforts me. It comforts me and it empowers me to know that God is me, that I am a individualized expression, an individualized manifestation of the divine. And what does that mean? And what do I make that mean? And how then do I look at the meaning of my life and the meaning of what I am going to make of my life? So that is the omnipresence of God. Sentence one, everything that exists or ever will exist is pressed out of the body of God, God's substance, in different forms of manifestation. The second sentence is a big bite too, but I think I'll do that in another video. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the first part of the omnipresence of God being the first principle of New Thought Christianity. The omnipresence of God is the first principle of Christianity. We are beginning with the foundation that God is everywhere, equally present at the same time. That is the foundation. That there is nothing but God. There is only God. Nothing else. Nothing to oppose God. But so we're not going to get into that until the next video. Nothing to oppose God, because if everything is God, what is there to oppose God? But yeah, different forms of manifestation. Different forms of manifestation. So even if the manifestation is something that you would regard as unpleasant, undesirable, there's God in that too. Something to think about. It can be a little bit uncomfortable, I think. I know for me, I can think of some things where I'm like, I have to squint really hard to see that God is in there. But a principle is not something that it's true sometimes and true and not true other times. It's always true. And God being everywhere equally present at the same time is a principle that I do believe is true. But I'm trying to wrap my mind around, what does it mean that I believe that is true? If I believe that is true, then what is it that I truly believe? Or what beliefs am I challenging that I had before, now that I am choosing to accept this belief that God is omnipresent, that everything that exists or will ever exist is pressed out of the body of God, God's substance, in different forms of manifestation. Yeah. That's heavy. That's heavy. That's heavy. Let me know what you think. Give me a comment. Please like, share, hit the notifications, because like I said, this is just the first half of the first principle that I am learning in this seminary that I'm in. I'll do another video on the second sentence, which talks about there being no evil in reality. But that first sentence is just so juicy and so much to chew on that I feel like this is a good stopping place. And yeah, I want to think about it some more. I want to put some more thought. I don't want to just jump off and leave on it. I want to put some more thought around it and really chew on what that really means before we just jump into the next thing. So you do the same, and I'll see you here next time.